Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Badger Packed Sports. It's going to be the podcast for all the Badger and Packer fanatics. Want to drop this first episode coming out around the NFL draft. Going to be really excited for that one. Green Bay Packers going to be picking 23rd. I'm here with my guy, Justin Legal, other Packer Badger fanatic. I'll let him give a little intro on himself.
Thanks, man. Robbie, it's good to be here. We've been planning this for a while, and I think it's no better time than the present. We're still licking our wounds a little bit from Badger football season, and then the way we ended the Packers season in Philly. With the draft in Green Bay too. I'm about 10 minutes from the stadium. I know you and I and some other guys are going to get together for the draft, so really looking forward to doing this show, seeing where it takes us. And yeah, I'm ready to dive in, man. Pick 23. We'll see if Goody could cook anything up. Let's dig in, man.
Oh yeah, we got lots of options still very early on in the process. So, we want to at least start getting a little bit of an idea of who we're liking right now. Obviously, lots of things are going to change. It's combine week, great week. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know. I'm wondering, what are the positions we're looking for? I think I got an idea. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the one that stares us in the face, and as Packer fans, it always gives our hopes up in draft season is the receiver room. We have a history from the Ted Thompson days, moving on to Goody now, where we fall in love with some guys early on, and our hearts get broken on draft night. But I think we have a really interesting spot here. Jordan Love, early on in his career, needs a number one guy. And I know, Robbie, you're going to talk about a couple guys you love. I have a few that I'm all about. So yeah, what are some guys, Robbie, that you're thinking in the receiver room to kind of complement this offense?
Yeah, so the first guy I want to talk about, and this is going to be a hard one because he might be a first round pick, and that's Matthew Golden out of Texas. So kind of a late add to the draft, seeing as he wasn't necessarily projected to come out this year, but came on strong at the end of the year for Texas, and has been flying up draft boards lately. Biggest things about Matthew Golden is I think he's got some elite early separation that he can create within 5 yards, and I think you saw last year Love struggling with wide receivers getting open. And I think if he's able to have that first 5 yards, be able to make a move and Love get the ball to him, that could be huge. Also, I think he's good working back to the ball in the red zone there. Has the ability to return the ball, and I think he's got good tracking for long passes. Biggest things that I'm kind of worried about for him is his long speed. I've heard some people say he's actually closer to like a 4.5, but then I've also heard 4.3. So I think the combine this week's really going to be big for him. So that's what I got as far as my first receiver. I want to hear who you got though.
Yeah, this guy, I've been messaging you about this guy for a couple days now, is Alec Iomanner out of Stanford. 6'2", big frame at 210. That's what he's listed. I'm curious to see what his weight's at the combine. But he's a solid X receiver on the outside, big presence. Played 2 years in Stanford. Between those 2 years, 125 catches, 1,800 yards, 12 scores. His big shining moment against Deion's Colorado Buffaloes, 29-0 halftime deficit. The dude just goes off. 13 catches, 294 yards, 3 scores. Took Travis Hunter to school that night. But we'll see if that translates. It's hard to watch the film. For those that are following the college game closely, Stanford is, let's say, not an elite program. But he's a guy that comes with size. And my comp to him is Jordy Nelson. And I know people are going to panic. I am not saying he's the next Jordy Nelson, but he does remind me a lot of his game. Similar frame, a little quicker 40 time, 4.42 is what I'm seeing. I do want to see him run that at the combine, and maybe we get some better numbers, but Jordy ran a 4.5. So a guy that's not going to, blow your socks off. He's not going to break any combine records, but he's a guy that just has strength in the interior and can catch some some 50-50 balls, some back shoulder passes. He's not the perfect guy, hence, kind of we're seeing him fall late first, early second round. We may get lucky and get some value with him in the middle of the second. Depends how the board falls. One of the issues we've talked about, is his drops. A lot of uncontested drops. I'm hoping, in the NFL, with the NFL coaching, that he can really work on his hand development. We know Downtavian Wicks struggled with drops this year. So do we want to bring in another guy with more drop issues? We'll have to see. But I just love the guy. I think he brings an element that we don't have. A guy that isn't a one-trick pony trying to run, deep fly routes or bubble screens. He's a guy that can kind of get in the middle on a 3rd and 8, and a guy that can get 10 yards. That Love can maybe fall in love with and create a connection with. So I like Io Manor from Stanford. It's a guy I'm really high on. Robbie, who's your second receiver that you're targeting?
Yep, second guy, I'd say he kind of falls into the Io Manor kind of category as far as more of that bigger bodied receiver, and that's Trey Harris. When I look at Trey Harris, I see a true X receiver, 6'3". I think he's got some speed. There are questions about the long speed. Once again, combine numbers going to be big for Trey Harris and seeing where he goes. I think he's got a pretty good release package to get off the line. I also thought it was interesting. I saw a video on him as far as PFF and number of screens he runs. He didn't run a lot of screens, but I did see a lot of passes where they just threw the ball to him on the outside because the corner was giving him space, and he was eating up the 5 to 6 yards. And that's a big time play for me. I mean, if you're getting 5 to 6 yards on a first down, you're already in second and short, and that's positive in my mind. I think he's aggressive. I saw on his tape against Georgia Southern, they were losing pretty bad. Ole Miss was, but he actually had a play where he ended up pushing off. Looked kind of like a weak push off, in my opinion, but the quarterback went right back to him on the next play. It's like he was aggressive. You could tell that he said, "Give me that ball again, because I'm going to show him I'm going to get it." So yeah, biggest thing about him too is his injuries. Ended last year with some injuries, and then through this year struggled with injuries. But I think if he's healthy, he could be a game changer there. So that's what I got on Trey Harris. So then who is your second receiver that the Packers should be looking at?
Yeah, Robbie, those are good points. And kind of this guy, I think he's quietly undervalued, and that's Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. You want to talk about size, a 6'4", 215-pound, kind of a wiry build. Looking at him, he looks like Christian Watson, honestly, watching him line up. He's got that wiry kind of look to him. He's definitely not the burner like Watson is, but he's a guy, you put on the highlight film, 50-50 balls in the end zone. In the red zone, and when the defense has the end zone as an extra defender in the back line, you need a guy that we can just put the ball up to. Jaden Higgins fits that. One of the things that he's solid at is his ability to work in zone coverage. Really good at finding open holes in the defense and settling in those areas for the quarterback to make a throw. And I think what we need a guy in this system for Love to give him high completion percentage throws. Love has kind of a if you look at those numbers for completion percentage, they're to be desired. Drops are a lot of it, but also we need some higher completion percentage throws and looks. And I think a guy like Jaden Higgins can come in, create a lot of yards after catch potential. But a guy that I think can get a gritty 5, 6, 7, 8 yards, and a guy in the red zone that Jordan can look to with confidence for a ball that only Higgins can get at 6'4". So maybe some lower percentage chance for completion, but a much lower percent chance of a turnover for a guy like Higgins. So I'm really interested to see how he tests too. His quickness is something that maybe a little bit underrated. In Iowa State, an interesting school for football. Not the most elite quarterback talent throwing to him, but they did have a solid season. So I'm curious to see, if he's a day two kind of guy. Goody loves to find value there, in that late second round pick, or we maybe shuffle around and snag a guy like Higgins out. It'd be interesting to see what we can do to help, formulate this passing attack more.
Yeah, I do like Higgins. I think he plays with some swagger. I watching his tape just when he caught some touchdowns on guys. He was excited. He let them know. So
Yes.
I
Yeah,
don't mind Higgins.
yeah, and in this receiving room, it's interesting. We talked about Watson, that knee injury, he's out for at least 70% of the season, you would think.
Yep.
And you just wonder for a guy like him with his speed, how is that still going to be the same after this knee injury? Reports were that it was a pretty gnarly knee injury. So we'll have to see how he recovers. But also Dobbs, a guy, head injury, concussions, that's some scary stuff. We don't know what the future holds for him. So you definitely need to inject this room with more talent. We know this is a draft show. But obviously, there's talks about free agency, but you definitely got to inject this room with some guys in the draft. So very exciting time to see how these guys run in the combine and what Goody and LaFleur look at for these guys in the future. So we'll see.
Yep, absolutely. Now, the next position that I kind of want to talk about, I think it's going to be a big deal, especially with the way the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, and that's going to be defensive line slash edge rushers. Clearly, defense is a little bit different. Them switching to the 4-3. So I don't know who's your first guy on the D line that you're looking at.
Yeah, and these picks are never sexy, right? When if we draft one of these guys at 23, we'll probably get a part of the fan base that's just groaning your hands in the face. But I love Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, 6'3", 305. He moves quicker than 305. Watching the tape, he does not look 305. He carries that well, but the guy has explosion off the line. Um, he transferred to Ole Miss from A&M, from Texas A&M, I should say. And Ole Miss had a sneaky good defense, second best rush defense in the NCAA, and Walter Nolan was one of the reasons why. The guy just comes off the ball with aggression. Versatile in both disrupting the run and the pass. I was watching some film. They even had him lining up on the edge, which I don't think that's where he's going to be in the NFL, but it just shows you the type of tools this guy has, for explosiveness and speed. One thing I noticed just kind of watching the film is sometimes he likes to come through with his head down and receivers run by and draw plays or a quarterback can take off. So, I think that's just some technique work that can be worked on in the NFL level. But his explosiveness and size would fit great in this 4-3 scheme to provide some depth behind Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt. So yeah, Walter Nolan, Ole Miss. Robbie, what do you think? What are you thinking for your next guy here?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go to the school that Walter Nolan transferred from, and that is Texas A&M. I'm gonna bring up the guy Shamar Stewart, projected to go in the first round, probably around that pick 23. The Packers are picking at, and the word I want to use that you used as well is versatile. I know that this staff definitely values versatility on each side of the line, offensive or defense. I think he's a scheme versatile guy, and he's 6'6", 290, and can move. So I mean that's just valuable at that size. I think he can play the run. Obviously, big issues with his limited sack numbers. Surprisingly, I feel like Texas A&M had a lot of guys on their line, and yet weren't able to produce that much. So I don't know if opposing offenses were saying, "Hey, we're going to get the ball out. We can't let these guys beat us," because they had a lot of pass rushers, and a lot of them are in the draft this year. So it's going to be interesting to see what all works there. I think he does have a tendency to get high, obviously, because he does have that 6'6" frame. Always a big issue with those guys. You're hoping they can stay low. And then, but I do think he's got potential though, and that's what you're going off of right now. At that size, it's going to be interesting to see what he runs. Obviously, if he runs, you know, under a 4.8, he's going to fly up boards, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point about the sack numbers. And in the college game, it's so hard to look at strictly sack numbers. I mean, those that watch the college game closely, a lot of quick passing. Quarterbacks get the ball in their hands a lot quicker in the college game, it feels. Obviously, when you're playing an FCS opponent like they do in the SEC quite a bit, they can probably stack up some sack numbers. But these guys in the SEC and the defensive side are hard to gauge, from pure statistics, just because the competition level is unbelievable. But I love the points you make. That frame 6'6". I feel like watching the Packers play, and I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I feel like we never bat any balls down at the line of scrimmage. Like getting a guy at 6'6". I mean, we talk about getting to the quarterback, but a batted pass is almost just as good, minus the yardage that you get from the sack. It's just creating that disruption with that size. I love that 6'6" frame from Stewart for sure.
Well, yeah, and I think a batted ball can sometimes get in a quarterback's head more than a missed pass, because now you're thinking, oh man, it's like this guy's got long arms. We got to get away from that, or I got to move to the side a little bit more. So great point there. All right, so who is your second guy, defensive line edge rusher?
Yeah, I brought in Nolan for the interior, and then for my edge guy, I'm looking at a guy, Michael Williams out of Georgia. 6'5", not as tall as Shamar, but just a very comparable from a height standpoint. In ways he's listed at 265. We'll see what he does at the combine for height and weight. But a guy we know Goody loves his Georgia Bulldogs. Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Eric Stokes. Some have panned out, some haven't. Some the jury's still out on. But definitely a guy that has plenty of accolades. Earning All-American honors as a freshman in 2022. Second team All SEC in 2023, 2024. One of the cons of Michael is the injury concern. We'll have to kind of see how that transpires in the combine and his pro day and what the doctors are saying. But over his career, 39 total tackles, 15 TFLs, 9.5 sacks. A guy that stops both the run and the pass, explosive off the edge. Somebody that he can also set the edge against the run. And that's something that I feel like under Hafley, we did such a great job last year. Our run defense took a leap up. And I think a guy like Michael Williams can help kind of steady the ship there and keep that positive momentum going on the run defense. But this guy, he can put his hand in the dirt. He can stand up. Very versatile for our 4-3 scheme. Some things that he needs to work on, maintaining his pad level. And something that a lot of guys struggle with, like Lucas Van Ness, is, a pass rush plan. Can you develop more than one move? We see LVN, we're as Packer fans, we're frustrated with him because he's pretty much a bull rush only guy, and it may work in the lower tier of the Big Ten. It's not going to work in the NFL. So we'll see if Michael Williams can develop pass rush moves. There's still areas for growth there. He's got tons of raw talent and physical tools. A guy that's trending later in the first round, 23. I've been seeing more mocks of him kind of slipping, and I think it's mostly because of that injury concern in 24. So we'll have to see. Hafley loves guys of versatility, and Hafley's not a heavy blitz guy. Can we get pressure without sending the house? Our secondary, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, will be even more exposed if we have to send extra rushers to get to the quarterback. So guys like Michael Williams or Shamar Stewart, like you brought up, can help a pass rush that really struggled last year at times.
Yeah, no, Michael Williams, definitely the injuries. I mean, there was talks about him kind of being the Javon Walker, who's the first overall pick comparisons before the start of the year. So definitely fallen just because of the injuries. I've heard a little bit just less explosive this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. You had your interior guy, and I know Shamar Stewart, maybe people would say he could go inside at 290, but my next guy, he's definitely inside, and that's Kenneth Grant, Mr. 340 pounds out of the University of Michigan. Definitely a big guy. At that size, he's there to stop the run, but he does have athletic ability. He's got a play where he runs down a running back. Like, he's got some speed in him too. It'll be interesting to watch the 10-yard split at the combine, just kind of seeing that explosiveness where he's at. He does show some ability as a pass rusher. If you can get him, a guy at 23, if you get him in there and he's a great run stopper, I'm happy with that. But then if you think you have the ability to develop a pass rush with him on top of that, I think that's where you take that potential in the first round. And I think Kenneth Grant definitely offers that. So, and I mean, like I said, he's like 6'3", 340 pounds. That's a big boy. It's going to be hard to move him. He's going to he's going to take some double teams, and hopefully that also helps with your rushers there too.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how this defensive line plays out with impending free agency, guys that are maybe not performing to the level that they need to. Like TJ Slayton is a guy that I love, and I know you like him a lot too. And we'll have to see what he does in free agency. Can Goody get him on a hometown discount? I think there's a lot of, we're talking about Rashawn Gary, a guy on the edge that got paid big money, had the knee injury a couple of years ago and looked like he started to get his footing towards the end of the season. It just really depends where Halfley sees these guys projecting, and will Goody invest early draft capital to address this room? Like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head early, Robbie, was the Eagles won the Super Bowl because of their front four. They didn't send any pressure on Mahomes. They were able to get pressure consistently. The pass rush and stopping the run is very important to win in the league in 2025. So yeah, I'm really curious to see how these guys test in the combine too, and where they fall on the boards after.
No, definitely going to be interesting. So that's it for D-line, edge rushers. And then I think the other one that I think a lot of people at the beginning of the draft, kind of like right after the season, you had kind of asked them what was their biggest concern, and it's going to be cornerback. You get down to it, it's like, yeah, you got Valentine there, but Alexander was hurt. It's like you just weren't very impressed with the room. Unfortunately, with this class, there's a lot of injuries going on with these guys. So now it's like your top guys aren't actually your top guys. And you're like, okay, is there a guy worthy of a first round pick? I'm kind of struggling to say yes. I mean, Will Johnson was projected to go early. Now I've even seen him fall because of he's got some injury concerns that didn't play as well this year. So I think there's going to be still some talent later on. And so that's kind of where I want to go. My guy, I would say he's a fringe first round. I've seen some chatter that he could be in the first round, but I think he's probably early second, mid second. And that's going to be Trey Amos, also out of Ole Miss. I wouldn't mind if, we had the two Treys from Ole Miss, just looking at my board. But I think as far as Trey Amos goes, he's got decent size, standing 6'1". And I just think he plays strong, and he plays everything good. I think he plays good man, and he plays good zone. Now, notice I'm saying good. I don't think he's great at anything, but he's going to be a consistent guy. So, I think that's kind of what takes him out of that first round conversation. It's the difference between him and Kenneth Grant, where it's like Kenneth Grant, he's going to be able to stop the run, and maybe he's going to develop the pass rush. I think Trey Amos, he does kind of attack the ball. I think he wants to be a ball hawk. He plays hard, in my opinion. So that's why I like him. So other thing with him is there are questions about his top end speed too. So another guy I'll be watching at the combine. So who you got?
Yeah, and this guy I'm going to bring up, injury, right? I don't have a lot of conviction in the early rounds. I kind of hope we avoid the cornerback room early on in the draft, and maybe we hit a couple guys in free agency. I know there's some, perhaps in a future episode we can talk about the free agents for corner, because I think that's where the Packers need to go. But if we would kind of look into it, a guy like Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, 6 foot 190. Great athleticism, very high IQ player. And I think those are the kind of guys Halfley has succeeded with. I mean, even a guy like Richard Sherman, back when Halfley was in San Francisco, Sherman was never the high tester, the guy that would jump off the field, but his intelligence on the field really helped him flourish in Halfley's scheme. And I think a guy like Morrison kind of fits that bill from an IQ standpoint. I think he's very intelligent, very sharp, very versatile in both man and zone. The big thing is injuries. He, 2024 had a hip injury that required surgery. Hips and surgery, that makes me nervous, especially for a position that requires lots of twitch and sharp sharp movements to cover the receivers in the league today. Sometimes he gets caught looking at the quarterback too and gets flat-footed and receivers blow by him. In the college game, you can get away with that a little bit because you have some top-end speed to catch up and to the receivers. But in the NFL, you got to be disciplined. And with Halfley being a defensive back guy, I think some of those things can be cleaned up. And I think, the DBs were pretty strong last year too. And you saw a lot of growth in guys like Keyshawn Nixon. So I think, a raw guy like Morrison, if he stays healthy, could be a really interesting guy. I just think at 23 is a little too much. It's a little too rich for my blood. If we traded back and acquired some picks and get a guy like him in the early second round or mid second round, I'd feel a lot better. Yeah, Robbie. So Benjamin Morrison, again, I like him. Do I love him? Not necessarily. Who do you got for another guy to look at, Robbie?
Yeah, so my guy is going to be Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. That's also where Valentine's out of, so making another connection there. And I just think, obviously he didn't have as good of a 2024 season, but the Packers do look at the season before as well. People talk about that with Dontavian Wicks, looking at his numbers the year before they were good, but the year he got drafted, they weren't that great. So I think he probably projects more as a zone cornerback. And it's interesting because I think when Halfley first came to the Packers, there's a lot of talk about press man coverage. But then the numbers last year said he was running more zone. So I think that's going to be something that's very telling in this draft is when they do take corners, what kind of corners are they taking? Because if he's going for press man corners, he might go somebody different. But I mean, Hairston, he's a scrappy player. I mean, even though he's 6'1", he's kind of skinny though. So I think, like I said, he's just tall and skinny, but he gonna get in there and he wants to play and he wants to take the ball away. So I like that. But yeah, so that's the same thing though with Benjamin Morrison. If they're playing a zone, I think he could be good in that. It's going to be interesting what Halfley does there. So then, who do you got as your second guy?
Yeah, and kind of
corner?
my I would love to land this guy third, fourth. I don't think he falls past the fourth. Is Zy Alexander out of LSU. 6'2", 194, has length. He started his college career off at Southeastern Louisiana, much lower competition, but like lots of college guys in the transfer portal era today, you see a lot of guys from lower level schools transfer for their senior year to a Big Ten, SEC, ACC school to try to boost their draft stock. And I think Zy Alexander had a great year for LSU. Um, 20 in 2024, 44 tackles, 7 passes defended, had 2 interceptions. The thing I love about him watching his film, and there's limited film for his 1 year at LSU, but he loves to lay the lumber. He's a guy that, with his length and size, if a running back gets to the outside, I think in the past, you always hold your breath. Can Jair make the tackle without hurting his shoulder? Can Keyshawn hang on? I think a guy like Zy Alexander has the tools to really be a solid guy to help stop the bleeding if a rush gets to the outside or a receiver makes a quick catch at the line at a bubble screen or something in the short game and make a solid, sound tackle. And I think under Halfley's defense last year, we saw quite a large improvement in tackling in the secondary. And I think those are the kind of guys he likes. Someone that he can rely on to knock the receiver down right away. Doesn't require a lot of help from the linebacking crew or missed tackles. I think Zy Alexander is someone, he's raw. He needs some more refinement in his technique and consistency. Third, fourth round pick. I think he's worth a flyer there. Not much higher than that. So we'll have to see. We talked about the cornerback room now, and Jair Alexander has been all over the press clippings with, his displeasure with how things have turned out in Green Bay the last 2 years. I believe he's only played 7 games in the last 2 seasons, and I think we saw the youth in our secondary. I think the idea of relying on Keyshawn Nixon as being one of our top DBs worries me. So I think we need to add some guys in the draft. But like you said, it's a tough class to hang your hat on, especially picking at 23 too, of a guy that we can say, you know what, we acquire him and our secondary gets better.
Yeah, no, I think it's been my opinion for a while now that cornerback needs to be the one thing addressed in free agency. I think, in my opinion, it's one of the deepest things as far as free agency. Obviously, we're going into the draft now, but once we get closer to free agency, we're definitely going to be bringing up guys as far as who the Packers can target there. But yeah, so that's all we got as far as positions of need. So, our three positions of need that we had were wide receivers. You got defensive line / edge rushers and cornerbacks. Anyone watching, if you got something that you think we missed, you're thinking center, because me and Justin did talk about that. That could be a thing. You're thinking a tackle because, we're missing some guys. Put it down there. If you think there's a guy we didn't talk about that we need to talk about, put it down there. Obviously I'm watching tape all the time. It's fun for me. I've been doing it for years now, ever since the Nick Perry draft. So aging me there. I wanted
Wow.
Janoris Jenkins that year. So
Oh yeah, this is a fun time of the year, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, please drop comments, reach out. We will be very interactive with the channel. We're excited to go on this journey, talking Packers, Badgers, anything else you guys want us to highlight. And it's going to be an interesting draft class, and I can't emphasize enough how much fun it's going to be in Green Bay. Going to be there in person. Going to just take it all in. It's like Christmas morning in April. So
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a student of a lot of podcasts. I was at a Locked On Badgers event, so talking with Ryan Herrings, Dylan Graff. They run Talking Badgers, so it was great talking it up with those guys. So once we get to Badger stuff, maybe have one of those guys come on, because I think that'd be fun. But no, and then I do, before we end this episode, I want to give a bonus guy that is not in any of these positions. And that is somebody that I think the Packers could take at 23. And I put it out on one of the Packer Discords about this guy. And so I got some confirmation that I'm not completely crazy. And that's Jaheed Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. Okay. This guy, he's 6'3", got great size. Not only could be an interior guy, but also has some ability to rush the quarterback from the edge. I think that'd be huge. I think Quay Walker being hurt, the 5th-year option, it's like, do we accept it? Do we not? I think, in my opinion, watching the tape, Quay Walker, he's a fast guy. If he knows where he's going, he's going to be able to take somebody on, no doubt. But the thing, watching Cooper last year on tape and then watching Campbell this year, is they seem very analytical, and they're able to analyze, but then also fire quickly with their acceleration and make plays on the ball. Campbell also looks very comfortable in coverage. So I think the Packers, if they took him at 23, I wouldn't be mad. It'd probably throw people off. But that dude is a talented guy, and he makes your team better.
yeah, and I think the other thing too is a guy like Isaiah McDuffie. He's a free agent too. That creates a hole in the linebacking room. And Quay Walker, not the most dependable being available. Quite a little bit of injury history there. So I love the boldness. And that's even a guy too. Goody likes to wheel and deal on draft night. Could you trade back? Would I be sad in Green Bay hearing at 23 Goody trades back? I think the draft nerds like Robbie and I, we would get it, but it would be a long night in Packer Nation if we traded back. But if we trade back for a guy like Jaheed Campbell, I mean, it's I think you let the initial shock syndrome wear off. Robbie, you make some great points. I think he would be a home run value guy at that late first round, early second round, depending on. I think his combine numbers may open some eyes too, and he may shoot up some boards.
I will say the only thing we can't do is trade back into the second round, the first pick of the second round with the Browns, because that is the exact thing we did when we traded away the opportunity to draft TJ Watt. And so I think that is a great thing to end on. Let's not make the mistake that we did before and not take a guy like TJ Watt. If somebody's there that we need to get, I don't know who that would be. But I just don't want to go into the second round. Plus we're going to be at the draft. So, selfishly. Now, if you want to use that pick to go for Max Crosby, Metcalf, that's a show for a different time. Little teaser. So But yeah, so I think that's all we got for the show today. Like I said, great going over these guys. If you like it, hit like, put a comment down there, and we could bring it up in the next episode. So probably be dropping another show after the combine's done. So thank you all you guys. Thank you, Justin. Great chatting it up with you.
See you guys. See you next episode.